All right guys, so every year about this time I try to do one video that goes over my bow and arrow setup that I'm going to be using for the remainder of the year, the hunting season. And so that's what we're going to do this video. We're going to go through my whole bow and arrow setup, talk about the bow, the arrows, broadheads, string, tab, all of that stuff. Got my notes here so I don't leave anything out. We're going to start with the bow, go through everything, and then towards the end of the video I'm going to answer some common questions that I get via direct message, YouTube comments, and stuff like that. So with that, let's just go ahead and jump right on in. If you guys have been watching my my shooting videos as of recent, you've probably seen me shooting this bow. This is an Osage orange flat bow. It's got snake skin on the back, and then underneath that snake skin it's got a light layer of sinew, back sinew from elk, I think, if I recall. I made this bow in the spring of 2020, and the only reason I know that, or that I remember that, is because this is one of the two bows that I took to British Columbia when I went on to alone. When I go on a big trip or big excursion like that, I always take two bows because you never know. I've never had to, cross my fingers, I've never had to resort to a backup bow. But you know, you spend all that time and effort getting out into a place, especially if you're going overseas or something. I like to have a backup just in case. So the snakeskin serves a couple of functions. One, it looks good, but then the more practical purpose is it covers up the sinew and it helps to protect it from the elements. Like right now it's raining outside. When I'm out at elk camp, I experience all kinds of weather, from bone dry to heavy wet snow to rain, and the bows that I take with me have to be able to stand up to all those different weather conditions. And along those lines, what I've been using recently to seal these bows is a couple of products from Mohawk. I'm using like a satin sandable sealer and then a clear coat on top of that. I'll put some links to that stuff in the video description if you're interested in it. So this is kind of my standard design, what I usually build for my hunting bows. It's 64 inches overall length. It's got some slight reflex in the limb tips, fairly deep handle section, and then my arrow shelf is cut not quite to center, but it's pretty doggone deep for a self bow. The rest material that I have on here is just Velcro. I get Velcro in 2-inch wide strips. I think you can get it from like Walmart or any of the big box stores. But I just take the hard part, the hard half of the Velcro, throw it away, and I use that softer part. And it's got a sticky back on it, so you can just peel it off, trim it to size, peel it off, and stick it right on there. The Velcro is soft and quiet. It buffers the arrow from the hard wood on the shelf, and it's not as affected by wet weather as some of the other, like a leather might be. Oh, Cedar's got all wet out there. All right, go lay down. So this bow is drawing right around 51.5 or so at 28 inches. Now I draw 29, and my bows usually towards the later end of that draw, they'll be gaining 3 pounds per inch. And so I'm drawing at 29 inches right around that 55 pound mark. And that's one of the questions I get very, very regularly. I'm going to talk about towards the end of this video, is some variation of like, what weight do I need for hunting elk, or what's the minimum draw weight that I need for hunting big game, or something like that. Like I said, I'm going to talk about that towards the end of the video. So I've been shooting this bow almost daily for the past, I'd say 4 or 5 months or so, and I'm shooting it really well. Really happy with the way I'm shooting going into this hunting season. My point on distance with this bow and these arrows is just a little over 30 yards, which is absolutely perfect, especially for hunting elk. All right, so moving on from the bow, I'll just talk briefly about the bowstring here. So this is a Flemish twist bowstring. It's 12 strands of D97, and it's served with .03 halo. And what I found is that combo fits a Bonding Classic nock pretty doggone well. So the nock fit that you're looking for is tight enough so that you don't have to worry about the arrow coming off the bow, but you want it loose enough so that when you tap the string like that, it's just going to pop off. if you have your nocks too tight, it can really mess up your tuning, and you're also robbing energy, you're robbing efficiency from your bow. So, you know, if you need to play around with the number of strands in your string or the size of the serving to get that fit right, do it, because it really pays dividends to have the right nock fit. So another thing you'll notice is I have 2 nock points on my string here. I've got one above and one below. That the one below helps to keep the arrow secure in the proper place on the string. But the other big thing that it does is when I put my string hand on the string and I slide it up, I actually stop right at the bottom of this bottom nock, and that gives me about just a very small fixed crawl, about a 1/4 inch or so, and that helps to raise that arrow up just a little bit, get a little bit closer to my eye, and that brings my point on distance a little bit closer. If I was sliding my fingers right up to my arrow, my point on distance would be a little bit farther. Another thing that it does, and this depends on the bow, but with some of the bows that I'm shooting, it can be really hard to get rid of tail high. And I found, and it doesn't work with all of them, but with certain bows, if you come off the arrow just a little bit, just come down just the string, just a hair, it'll take care of that nock high arrow flight. So the D97 is a low stretch string material, and there's a bazillion different types of string material out there, and I'm not technical enough to know what all the properties of the different string materials are. I've been using this for over 10 years and it's worked well for me, so I've just stuck with it. Now, with self bows, you might still find information out there that says that you shouldn't use the low stretch stuff because it's hard on the bows, it could cause the bows to break or something like that. Like I said, I've put this on hundreds of bows and I've never had a bow break that I could attribute to the string. So take that for what it's worth. All right, so just real quickly, I'll talk about the string silencers here. Now this bow has 1 string silencer, if you notice. That is not for any particular reason. I really have no idea why I only have 1 string silencer on this bow. I actually just noticed that today. So I don't know, maybe I just got lazy and didn't put one in there, but it shoots fine. The string is pretty dead. It's not making a lot of noise, so I'm just gonna leave it this way. So this string silencer is just some wool yarn, and the way that I make them is I take 2 nails, finishing nails work best because they don't have a head on them, drive them into a board about, whatever, I don't know, 2.5 inches or so apart, and I wind the yarn around there, and then I take a piece of usually serving and I'll tie them in the middle, and then I take scissors and I'll snip the ends down to where they wrap around the nails. Then you can split your bowstring, stick them in there, and retwist your bowstring, and you can use that serving to tie them in there if you want to. But you put them in, pluck your bowstring a couple times, and they fluff up just like this. You can trim them if you need to. But they work really well, and when it's wet like it is right now, it's raining outside, if they get wet, that wool, you just pluck your bowstring a couple times and they just pop, they fuzz right back up. I don't always use string silencers. Like I'll shoot bows a lot without string silencers and they're just fine. They don't, like some bows just don't need them. So this is a tab that was made by Omnivore's Homestead and Quivers, and they actually sent me this tab years ago, and at the time I was shooting a tab that I'd made myself, and when I got this I just kept on shooting the tab that I made because I was used to it, and didn't really think about this, but then a dog chewed up my tab that I was shooting, and so I didn't have a tab, so I picked this one up, started shooting it, and I really liked it. I've got it to the point now where it's really well broken in, it's fit to my string, I can put it on there, slide it up to that bottom nock, and I know that I'm in the right place. But it's made with nice leather, it's really good construction, it's got a little adjuster thing here on the back. Can cinch that up to my finger and I don't have to worry about it being there. If I'm using my hands, I just flip it around to the back side and I'm good to go. Again, I'll put a link to these guys down in the video description. But I keep, just an easy way to make sure you keep tabs on your tab, put it on an arrow and then stick it right in between the hood and the arrow holder on your quiver. You know it's there. You're never going to lose it that way. All right, so that gives us a good transition into the quiver. Any of you that have been watching my videos for very long at all have seen these style of quivers. These were made by Donnie Wilkerson down in Florida, creekwalkertrading.com. Again, I'll put a link down in the video description. But they're all handmade. They're really nice looking quivers on a stick bow. This part right here is made out of laminated wood, and I think he makes them out of several different types of wood, so you can choose what type of wood you can get your quiver made out of. The hood is really nice quality, good stitching. It's big enough you can put, and deep enough you can put even the longest, like a tough head, meathead, or one of the long bear grizzly broadheads. You can stick that thing all the way up in there. And they're not too crowded up in the hood. The arrow, the rubber thing that holds the arrows right here fits these 11/32 Doug Fir shafts really, really well. And I think he might have different options for here. So if you're shooting carbons that are smaller diameter, you could probably specify that and get a different size rubber piece down here that'll hold those arrows tighter. Now, one of the things that has changed about these quivers over the years is the attachment, how he attaches the quiver to the bows. When he first started making these quivers, he had a Velcro strap down here, and so the quiver would kind of roll around on the bow a little bit. But here recently he started using these rubber straps from Great Northern, and this is rock solid. Like, that thing is not moving on this bow at all. Like them. They're very nice quivers. All right, so moving on to what's really important, what gets the job done right here. So these arrows are made by Andy over at Addictive Archery. Andy makes really good arrows, carbon, wood, make whatever you want. They're 11/32 Doug Fir shaft, and they've got a slight tail taper down here at the end. Now these are cut to basically right to my draw length. But I would recommend, unless you know exactly what your bow likes in terms of arrows, it's often best to order them just a little bit longer so that you have room to play with the tuning. I'm gonna link to another video if you're not familiar with tuning by shortening your arrows or changing your tip weights and things like that. I'm gonna link to another video that'll explain all of that stuff. I'll put a card up here somewhere, and then also a link in the video description. So I like a really bright tail end on my arrow, and I've got a white crown dip here and bright pink fletchings. That just helps you to trace that arrow's flight, especially in low light. It's very important to see where your arrow hits, because that's going to give you information so that you'll know how to follow up on that shot. You know, do you need to give that animal some time, or can you follow up relatively quickly? The pink, the reason I went with pink is because in the woods that I hunt in, there's nothing else out there that's pink, and so when you see an arrow sitting out in the field, they really stand out. All right, so for the business end of these arrows, I decided this year to switch them up a little bit. Not for any particular reason, but these are the 190 grain cutthroats. They're single bevel, 2-blade, cut-on contact heads, and I'm personal opinion, I'm partial to the 2 blades, and for traditional shooters, I am an advocate for cut-on contact heads all the time. I'm not a fan of the chisel tip type heads that are more common with the removable blades or replaceable blade broadheads that are common in the compound world. So there's a couple of important things to take into consideration with your head. Number one is just make sure that they're aligned with the shaft. Make sure that you get a nice, good alignment, good spin on those things. And then number two is just make sure they're sharp. No matter what kind of broadhead you're shooting, whether it's a you know, a 2-blade head like this, or a 3-blade, or even a 4-blade, whatever you're shooting, make sure it's sharp. And if I have videos showing, giving you tips for how to sharpen your broadheads. If you're not comfortable sharpening them, there are services out there that will do it for you. But I can't stress that the importance of that enough, is having a very, very sharp broadhead. Now, I touch up my broadheads every couple of days throughout the season. I carry a little knife sharpener with me because just the act of pulling arrows in and out of the quiver, it takes just a little bit of that edge off. And when I hunt my butt off to get that one moment, I want my broadhead to be absolutely razor sharp. So I've got that little field sharp or work sharp field sharpener that I carry with me. It's got a fine side and a strop on it, and when I'm sitting in the woods, have some downtime or something, I just really lightly kind of take that and just bring that really keen razor edge back to it. Your broadheads should, and these are dull because I've been shooting them into my my 3D targets, but they should shave when you do like this. They should slick that hair right off of your arms. All right, so just a little bit more about the fletchings on this thing before we move on. These are 4.5 inches. I'm not sure exactly what the height is, maybe 1/2 inch, maybe just a shade over 1/2 inch. Just a wee bit of helical on them. And then the other thing that is probably a little bit different on my arrows than most guys' arrows is I like to set my fletchings as far back on the shaft as I can and still have clearance for my fingers. The big reason that I do that is because the self bows that I'm shooting, I like to shoot them with a relatively low brace height, and having my fletchings farther back on my shaft just gives me a little bit of extra space right here so that I can run them with a low brace height without having to worry about my fletchings riding up on the shelf. The reason I like to run these with a low brace height is because it's just less stress on the bow, and I leave these things strung all day when I'm out hunting. So when I'm out big game hunting, I've got the 5-arrow quiver. I usually carry 4 broadheads and 1 small game blunt. Now the blunts that I like, these are Ace hex heads, and I like these because if I'm out stump shooting or just shooting out in the field, the hex heads stop the arrows really well. It's going to keep them from sliding up under the leaf duff or the sod like a field tip would. But then the other thing is, if there's a rabbit or a grouse in the grass or in the brush, they're narrow enough that you can still punch these through that brush and get a good hit on whatever critter is in the brush that you're trying to get. I've shot many grouse with these things, and they pack an absolute wallop, and they penetrate just enough so that a lot of times it'll string the grouse halfway on the shaft and keep them from flying away. If they do fly off, they're not going to fly very far, usually. All right, so moving on, I want to talk a little bit about one of the common questions that I get, especially around this time of year, is some variation of like, what's the minimum draw weight that I need for hunting whatever species, or, you know, will, say for example, a 55-pound bow or will a 50 or a 40-pound bow kill an elk? You know, some variation of that. Guys are looking for like, what can they get away with, or what's the minimum they should shoot for to start hunting. And that is it's really an impossible question to answer when the only information you have is the draw weight of the bow, because there's so many other factors that weigh into the amount of penetration that you're going to get and the lethality of your arrow. Your draw weight or your draw length comes into play. A longer draw length is going to give you more power stroke, more time for that bow to transfer the energy that you place into the bow to the arrow. How well your arrows are tuned, what type of broadheads you're shooting, how sharp your broadheads are. There's a whole bunch of things that factor into you know, the amount of penetration that you get. A really good example of that is Liz has been shooting I think she's drawing right around 42 pounds or so. She's shooting a compound, and she's shooting really small diameter VAP shafts. And she will consistently get deeper penetration in our foam targets than I will, even though I'm shooting a bow that's almost 15 pounds heavier. Now, how does that translate to penetration on an animal? I don't know. I feel like I know that I can shoot clean through a bull elk with this bow, and I feel very confident with the arrows that we've combined with her bow that she'll be able to do the same with a 42-pound compound. And so the advice that I would give you is shoot the heaviest weight that you can shoot accurately. You know, if moving up in bow weight means that you're struggling a little bit and your accuracy starts to wane some, drop back down, because I feel like a well-placed arrow is much, much, much more important than, you know, draw weight. Now, with that said, if you're going to be pushing the lower limits of draw weight in bows, you should check your state's regs, because most states are going to have some minimum draw weight and perhaps some other minimum requirements that they, to be legally able to bow hunt, that you're going to have to meet. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this video. By the time you see this, we are probably going to be in the mountains for quite some time. So if you leave a comment and I don't respond to it, that's probably why. So good luck this fall, and we'll see you next time.